I can't imagine what my life would look like without tennis. It's the second week of the Australian Open, and like we did last week, which you guys absolutely loved, we did a recap of the whole tennis week to make sure you don't miss out on any highlights from on and off the court, even if you're super busy.
5:30, jazzercise. 6:30, dinner with me. I can't cancel that again.
Honestly, it's been a crazy couple of days on both tours. Here's everything that happened this week.
Novak Djokovic will retain his world number one status, but has been kicked out of his home in Melbourne. Jannik Sinner is unstoppable. Defending champion Aryna Sabalenka continues to annihilate opponents like nobody's business. The Andrei Rublev curse continues, while Alexander Zverev turns into a cyborg. Meanwhile, the WTA's unpredictability across the playing field could be at an all-time high. Coco Gauff is among those who want to see both tours merge. Elsewhere, Nick, tennis commentary is my side hustle, Kyrgios, continues to entertain the crowd.
I can't keep calm at the moment, so let's get into all of it right away.
Something crazy happened on Saturday. World number one Iga Swiatek got beaten by Linda Noskova in 3 sets in their third round encounter. It was Noskova's first time in the main draw at the Australian Open, but the 19-year-old quickly rewrote the history books by becoming the first teenager on the WTA Tour to defeat a world number one at the AO since 1999. So, we're beginning to see that the Australian Open isn't really Iga's forte. She hasn't progressed past the round of 16 in Melbourne since making the semifinals in 2021, and even the 21-year-old Swiatek admitted that something just wasn't clicking when she arrived at Melbourne Park.
Any idea what the problem might possibly be?
Meanwhile, Anna Blinkova's upset over Rybakina cost her everything, and she couldn't quite make it past Jasmine Paolini. On the men's side, Felix Auger-Aliassime got owned by Daniil Medvedev once again in straight sets. Medvedev is such a terrible matchup for the Canadian. Their head-to-head now stands at 7-0 in favor of the Russian.
For many of you guys who keep wondering what the problem really is with Felix and why his game is sometimes so painful to watch, we might be coming up with a video about him, so make sure to smash that subscribe button and stay tuned for more.
Well, Nuno Borges earned the biggest win of his career after beating Grigor Dimitrov in 4 sets.
I also didn't see that coming. Dimitrov has been in good shape, and I thought he was going to make a deep run in the tournament, but it didn't quite happen.
For Borges, his third round win should be enough to see him break into the top 50 when the rankings are updated, and we can expect to see more of him in the coming months. Elsewhere, Tommy Paul got beaten by Kecmanovic in a 5-set thriller, while Cameron Norrie beat Casper Ruud in 4 sets to reach the last 16 of the AO for the first time in his career. I was particularly impressed with Norrie because before now, he had only taken 1 set off Ruud in their previous 3 clashes. Also, it was only the second time he beat a top 20 player in a Grand Slam. Carlos Alcaraz and Sasha Zverev also won their matches without really breaking a sweat.
But off the court, it was a different thing altogether.
Andy Murray cracked us up with his clapbacks at Liam Brody, as we can see in these tweets. It's not the first time we've seen Andy cook his compatriot, and I'm not even sure why these two keep having a go at each other.
After seeing the funny exchanges, I was like, okay, that's enough internet today. Time to get rested and prepare for tomorrow.
Sunday came with 2 sides to it, the hot and the cold. Novak Djokovic bageled Adrian Manarino twice before closing out the match with a 6-3 score in the final set. Seeing the crowd cheer for Manarino and the huge smile on his face after avoiding a triple bagel against Novak was quite hilarious. With his victory, Nole equaled Roger Federer's record of quarterfinal appearances. Post-match, Nole was asked a couple of questions. In one of his responses, he said that he enjoys his rivalry with Alcaraz, Medvedev, and Sinner more than he did with Federer and Nadal, and that he gets along more with the younger generation. At that point, some Federer and Nadal fans might have been like, just keep my goat's name out of your mouth.
I don't think Novak's comments were intended to hurt anyone's feelings, though.
Up next, we saw Taylor Fritz take on Stefanos Tsitsipas. The American had lost all 11 of his previous meetings against top 10 players at slams, including a 4th round defeat against Tsitsipas in Melbourne 2 years ago in 2022. This time, we saw the much more confident version of Fritz, who had told his team ahead of the match that he was going to beat Steph. I thought Fritz's backhand cross-court and down the line were exceptional, and his net game was on point in addition to his already excellent serve and powerful ground strokes.
The end result, a first top 10 win in a major, a first Australian Open quarterfinal, and a return to the top 10. Not a bad day at the office, if you ask me.
As for Jannik Sinner, he beat Karen Khachanov in straight sets. However, Andrei Rublev had to come back from 2-1 down to beat the Demon in 5 sets. As most of us already might know, De Minaur's playing style requires a lot of legs, which is why he looked really gassed in that 5th set. For Rublev, it was his 300th level tour win. On the women's side, Mira Andreeva saw her fairy tale run finally come to an end at the hands of Barbara Krejcikova, who I still think is one of the smartest players on the WTA Tour. Mira simply got outfoxed by the 7th seed as she couldn't really find her rhythm throughout the match. Meanwhile, Aryna Sabalenka, Marta Kostyuk, and Coco Gauff all had easy wins.
I saw some of you guys comment on Coco Gauff having an easy run in this tournament. Of course, y'all have a valid point.
So it's Monday, and there were no more surprises at this point. Arthur Cazot and Nuno Borges couldn't pull off another upset against much higher-ranked opponents, but it was quite strange to see Medvedev squander 2 match points and lose the 3rd set 5-7 after being up 5-2 against Borges. Credit to the Portuguese for fighting all the way through. Later on, we saw Cam Norrie push Sasha Zverev all the way in another epic 5-setter before Carlos Alcaraz wrapped the day up with a straight sets victory against a stubborn Kecmanovic. And with that, Carlitos became the youngest man since Novak Djokovic to reach the quarterfinal of every slam. It's probably why he felt like Luke Skywalker for a moment. Alexander Zverev forgot his dad's birthday, but made up for it as the fans joined him in serenading his dad with a happy birthday song.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Dad. Happy birthday to you.
Good thing he's sticking to tennis.
On the women's side, we saw Alina Svitolina retire early in her 4th-round match against Linda Noskova.
Honestly, it was heartbreaking to see because I personally considered her to be a dark horse for the title, considering that many of the other big guns were out.
Noskova and Diana Yastremska earned their first quarterfinal appearances.
So I said Monday came with no surprises. Well, I lied.
We saw Brendan Nakashima return to the winner's circle, winning a challenger title in Tenerife. It's actually his first title at any level since the 2022 Next Gen ATP Final.
Hopefully it's the start of a new chapter for the American, because I'm not quite sure what happened to him.
It's Tuesday, and we are deep into the tournament. Taylor Fritz is met with the impossible task of beating Novak Djokovic, which he predictably fails at despite his best efforts.
Can't blame him. At least he put up a fight for 2 sets and a half.
Their head-to-head now stands at 9-0, for Nole, obviously. What can you say about that? For the Joker, it's a record-extending 48th Nole semifinal appearance after beating the American in 4 sets. Also, it's his 700th career win on hard courts. Another insane record there. Oh, and there's yet another one. Nole equaled Monica Seles' number of consecutive wins at the Australian Open. Seeing the Joker casually destroying Fritz and then blowing kisses to Kyrgios in the commentary box was pretty brutal, to say the least. Meanwhile, we now know that every time Nole reaches the Australian Open semis, he goes on to win the tournament. Do you see that changing? Anyway, it was a little funny to see Djokovic's team not paying attention to him during one of the changeover.
They had only one job.
Anyway, the Nick and Novak show continued with an on-court interview. In the other quarterfinal clash, it was Andrei Rublev against Jannik Sinner.
Honestly, I thought that the umpire was going to be requesting new balls every second because of the incredible power on display from these two.
In the end, it was a straight sets win for the Italian, who pounced on Rublev's second serves like an apex predator. Rublev had a miserable 37% win rate on his second serve, compared to Sinner's 58%, and the Russian couldn't capitalize on any of the 8 break points he had. This proved to be the difference.
I don't need to say much about Jannik Sinner at this point. Just check out the video we made about him, and you'll understand why he's playing so well.
We don't often see Sinner showing emotions, but after coming back from 5-1 down against Rublev in the second set tiebreak, we saw that happen. Sinner is the only man yet to drop a set at the Australian Open at this point, winning 15 consecutive sets in the process. Sinner has now won 25 of his last 27 matches since the US Open.
What's the secret, Jannik? Be honest with us.
Well, I was a little worried when I saw Sinner hold his tummy at some point in the match. Hopefully, it's nothing too serious. For Rublev, he's stuck at the quarterfinal hurdle of a Grand Slam again, for the 10th time. And really, it sucks because Rublev is a likable guy, and we all want to see him break this curse one day. On the women's side, we saw Super Sabalenka take down Krejcikova. If consistency was a word, guys. Krejcikova's tactical play was simply no match for the raw power of Sabalenka. In the other match, we saw Coco Gauff hold off Marta Kostyuk. The match was characterized by wild swings in momentum. Marta was the first player to break Coco's serve all tournament, if I'm not mistaken, and really it could have gone either way because there was a truckload of unforced errors throughout the match. By the way, why was a baby allowed to enter the stadium in one of the matches of the day? Apart from the heat that makes toddlers really kind of fussy, it just seems like common sense to not bring a baby to a tennis mat. But if you have other solutions, please feel free to share. Meanwhile, Coco Gauff is among those who want both tours merged. What are your thoughts about that?
Personally, I'm down for it.
We also heard the news of Rafael Nadal being among the Doha entrants. I'd love to take that news with a grain of salt. Wouldn't want to get my hopes up too high if you know the angle I'm coming from. Elsewhere, we see a rare clip of Darren Cahill in his element, and Andy the Dumbledad Murray is up to more mischief.
But if you thought Tuesday was action-packed, I can only think of what you'll say about Wednesday.
The WTA saw Zheng Qinwen become the first Chinese woman to break into the top 10 since her idol Li Na, after beating Anna Kalinskaya in 3 sets in a match that lasted 2 hours and 20 minutes. The 12th-seeded Zhang had to battle back from a set down to reach her first Grand Slam semifinal. In the other encounter, Diana Yastremska, who came into the week ranked number 93, became the first qualifier to reach the semifinals of the women's singles draw at the Australian Open since 1978 after beating Linda Noskova. Diana is also only the 5th qualifier in the Open era to reach a Grand Slam women's singles semifinal. Unbelievable stuff there.
But the biggest news of the day happened to be on the men's side.
Alexander Zverev suddenly turned into a cyborg and played the match of his life. For someone who had struggled against Klein and Cam Norrie, needing 5 sets to overcome them in earlier rounds, seeing him play at such a high level was really just unbelievable. In the past, Zverev had trouble closing out matches, and his mental resilience, especially in Grand Slams, has been questioned.
But this time, things were different.
Zverev schooled Alcaraz in the first 2 rounds, and after Alcaraz came from 5-2 down to win the 3rd set, Zverev was like, call 911, but not for me, as he wrapped up things in the 4th set. An impressive 85% first serve percentage was some masterclass display from Zverev, while he was able to break Alcaraz time and time again. Zverev wasn't missing anything. His serve, backhand, forehand, remarkable consistency from the German.
At this point, I think it's safe to say that Sasha has finally picked up from where he left off before his nasty injury, because watching him at the United Cup and now at the Australian Open, he's just a different beast.
But kudos to Carlitos for not going down without a fight. I thought he was way erratic on his backhand and just couldn't hurt Sasha from the baseline. Well, at the moment, Carlos now has a 3-6 win-loss record against top 10 players since Wimbledon last year, so it hasn't been pretty against the big boys for Carlitos. Also, his loss to Zverev effectively confirms Djokovic's #1 position after the Australian Open. In the other match, it was an epic 5-set thriller between Daniil Medvedev against the big serving Hubert Hurkacz. These guys barely missed at points on their first serve, but as the game wore on, Medi started to tire out, but Hurkacz got tight and really just couldn't take advantage. One statistic that stood out throughout the match to me was Medvedev being 44-26 against Hurkacz in rallies longer than 9 shots. In the end, the number 3 seed prevailed in what was his 100th Grand Slam match.
At this point, the stage for the semis was set.
Novak versus Sinner, Medvedev versus Zverev. The first time that Zverev and Medvedev would be meeting in a Grand Slam. Kinda weird that we've never seen that matchup before now. I mean, it's their 19th meeting, and it's quite poetic that this matchup is coming right after that Netflix episode. ATP's Golden Boy versus the villain. Thank goodness many of us love Daniil Medvedev and don't really see him the way the Netflix cameras portrayed him. Elsewhere, Leighton Hewitt gets inducted into the Australian Tennis Hall of Fame inside Rod Laver Arena. The former world #1 spent 80 weeks at the top of the rankings and won 30 ATP singles titles, including 2 majors, the 2001 US Open and 2002 Wimbledon. He also won back-to-back ATP finals in 2001 and 2002, and reached the Australian Open final in 2005. Meanwhile, former WTA world #1 Ash Barty takes to the golf course and is set to headline the Pro-Am event at next month's PGA stop at the New Zealand Open. And finally, Rohan Bopanna is set to become the oldest world #1 in the history of men's doubles at the age of 43.
What a day. It's really never too late to achieve anything you want.
It's Thursday, and a hungry Sabalenka is looking to avenge her 2023 US Open final defeat at the hands of Coco Gauff. Gauff is on a 12-match winning streak in Grand Slams and is undefeated in 2024. Sabalenka, on the other hand, is on a 12-match winning streak at the Australian Open and is yet to lose a set herself at the tournament.
Interestingly, Coco leads the rivalry 4-2, but all that is about to change.
The match gets underway, and Sabalenka quickly imposes her dominance, breaking Gauff twice to build a 5-2 lead. Sabalenka was serving way better than Gauff, who double faulted 5 times on her first 8-second serves. But Gauff was able to regain her composure and methodically draw level by improving her first serve percentage and staying in those longer rallies. Sabalenka then made amends after blowing her 5-2 lead by taking the tiebreak. Coco tried to be more aggressive at times, and that came at the expense of her usually consistent ground strokes. Both players exchanged holds until Coco served at 4-4, where she put a tight forehand into the net, followed by a shabby backhand to give Sabalenka the break, before the defending champion closed out the match 7-6, 6-4 your final score. The other semi-final encounter between Zheng and Diana Yastremska was also close at times, but what stood out to me was Zheng landing more first serves while also being able to contain Yastremska's serves to a good extent. Also, Zheng's heavy topspin forehand kept Yastremska on the move, and the Chinese player was able to win most of the rallies 5 shots and longer. Yastremska struggled with her movement at times and even needed a medical timeout, so kudos to her for being able to put up a great fight regardless. Defending champion Sabalenka faces Zheng in the final and is the favorite to retain her Australian Open title. With the final stage set on the WTA, all attention is turned towards the ATP Tour to see how the semi-final tie would play out the following day. We were about to witness the most anticipated matchup of the year. So on Friday, we saw madness, magic, mayhem in Melbourne. Novak Djokovic was beaten emphatically in his favorite Grand Slam, and it was simply unbelievable. Sinner played the match of his life by dominating the 24-time Grand Slam champion in all quarters, and the Italian didn't even face a break point all match. We were lucky to see the match go 4 sets, because honestly, it could have ended in straight sets. That's how good Sinner was. But we should also talk about how bad Djokovic was without taking any credit away from the young Italian. Sinner had only 24 unforced errors compared to Nole's 56, and Sinner's serves and ground strokes, particularly down the line, were as good as ever. For Djokovic, he even admitted after the match that it was his worst performance in a Grand Slam, and that he was shocked at his level. Djokovic hadn't been at his lethal best for most of the tournament. Well, maybe except against Mannarino. But still, winning only 2 out of his 6 matches in the tournament in straight sets suggested that there was a problem, but no one saw this coming. The conditions were also quite windy, which only compounded Nole's problems, and there was kind of an uncharacteristically low energy and flat emotional effect from Novak throughout the match. 6-1, 6-2, 6-7, 6-3 your final score there. Jannik Sinner is now 9-1 against top 5 opponents in his last 10 matches, which is also absolutely incredible. He's now won 3 out of his last 4 matches against Djokovic. This kid is built different. For Djokovic, it's only his 3rd semifinal defeat in 10 years in Grand Slams, and his first ever at the Australian Open. But here's one crazy stat. Novak lost to Sinner after 2,195 days at the Australian Open. His loss to Carlos Alcaraz at Wimbledon last year also came after 2,195 days. You can't make this up. We're gradually entering a new era, but don't count the Serbian out just yet. He'll be back. The stakes were also high in the other semi-final encounter between Alexander Zverev and Daniil Medvedev. Zverev raced to a 2-set-to-love lead, and it didn't really look like Medi had any fight left in him. Zverev was 2 points away from the final and had only lost once after being 2-love up at this stage of a slam, but yet again, Daniil showed the stuff he's made of by pulling off another incredible comeback to win the last 3 sets and reach his 6th Grand Slam final. It's also his 3rd Australian Open final in 4 years. Medi's first serve percentage increased from 50% across the first 2 sets to 71% in the decider, and he hit 22 more winners in the final 3 sets compared to the first 2. The match ended 5-7, 3-6, 7-6, 7-6, 6-3, and Zverev would later attribute his loss to his declining physical state. But for Medvedev, this will be the first time that he isn't facing Novak or Rafa in a Grand Slam final, and he's openly declared that he's ready for the fight of his life against Sinner. But who are you guys rooting for?
But one thing is for sure, we are in for a blockbuster Australian Open final. Until next time, keep swinging.